founded late in M35, the Iron Wardens were founded partly as a possible counter to the Marines that were now rogue due to the Morea schism. While those outcasts would go on to found the loyal Sons of Medusa, the Iron Wardens themselves would go to prove themselves as tactically brutal Space Marines. Like their forebearers, the Wardens have close relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus. This not only allows the chapter to use and maintain advanced weapons and vehicles, but often the chapter will march alongside the Skitarii and other forces of Mars. This, however, leads the chapter to accept numerous missions from the Mechanicus, often without questioning the orders given. This has led to clashes with other parties, both Chaos and Xenos alike. The chapter doesn't follow the Codex Astartes as far as chapter organization goes. They are ruled by a chapter council rather than a chapter master. Veterans are spread across all companies, and the duties of scouts are carried out by experienced battle brothers. A corps of 4 battle companies with 200 battle brothers each forms the bulk of the Warden strength, which in turn are reinforced by 4 reserve companies of 80 men. This gives the chapter the ability to hit harder than Codex-compliant chapters. But at the same time, it means the Wardens must choose carefully which call to war it responds to. The chapter dreadnoughts are formed into the 9th Company, led by the most senior of their number, the founder of the Iron Wardens, Kentaro. The 9th rarely deploy as one unit, and they are usually assigned to strike forces, led by a venerable dreadnought. The Morea schism was the largest internal conflict to plague the Adeptus Mechanicus, the fighting spreading across the galaxy long after the rebellious world's destruction. The chapters of the Adeptus Astartes with close ties to the machine cult were the most heavily affected of those outside the organization. Many different solutions were undertaken by each of the chapters affected. While some, such as the Red Talons, destroyed the rebels immediately, their founding chapter took a unique approach. The Iron Hands Council voted in favor of exile. However, this vote wasn't unanimous. Iron Captain Kentaro of Clan Company Sorgo 1 had argued against such action, stating that allowing these Marines to leave with no censor or mission would simply leave them no choice but to raid and loot in order to survive at best, and at worst, could cause the heretical doctrine to spread further, causing a greater schism within the Mechanicus. After the Morea Iron Hands had been removed from Medusa, the Voice of Mars approached Captain Kentaro with an offer. The higher-ups of the Adeptus Mechanicus and a significant number of High Lords of Terror and Inquisitors had taken an interest in how the Iron Hands had dealt with the situation. Similar concerns had arisen in the various organizations over the release of Marines that embraced an edict that had been declared heretical by the proper authorities. As such, there had been a vote to create a new chapter in the next founding of Space Marines of Iron Hand descent. They would serve as a counterforce if the Morea Marines turned against the Imperium, as well as being a loyal force that would act on the behalf of Mars and Terra, undertaking difficult missions that other chapters would be hesitant in accepting. Kentaro accepted this honor, taking his most trusted veterans with him to Mars, where the full chapter would be assembled. Once they arrived, Kentaro was introduced to the rest of the Marines that would assist in filling out the ranks. Veterans and specialists from the Red Talons who had completely eradicated the entirety of their Morean element. These similar ideals in both faith and tactical doctrine went a long way to speeding up the training process. Starting as a Codex-compliant chapter, they raised the 2nd and 3rd companies before being assigned to a crusade into the Calixis sector, intent on bringing the sector into the Imperium. Leaving some of the veterans to continue training and to receive the war machines and ships of the chapter, Kentaro took the 2 companies aboard the newly constructed battle barge Gorgon's Wrath and made for the rally point. However, the crusade was short-lived as the ecclesiarchy had voted against the formation of the chapter. Not wanting an additional chapter to be so closely linked to the Adeptus Mechanicus, while they failed to tip that vote in their favor, they began throwing their political weight around to deny this crusade with as much support as possible. With the Mechanicus only able to provide logistical support due to local forces being reassigned elsewhere, the Wardens were the only ground force still assigned. The ecclesiarchy knew that the chapter would not receive reinforcement and thought the chapter would be either forced to suffer a shameful retreat to Terra or lose much of its fledgling strength to a crusade it could not hope to complete. Kentaro chose a third option. Meeting with the tech adepts that were assigned to oversee the rebuilding process, he asked them which system was Mars most interested in that would not require a corridor to be held back to the Imperium. The priest pointed to the Deminsa system, highlighting the third planet of the 6 displayed on the map. Records indicated that this system was already industrially advanced to the point where little preparation would be needed for it to produce the material the Imperium would require. Kentaro then made the decree that the Iron Wardens would establish this foothold and await sufficient forces to be gathered for the crusade to begin properly. The liberation of Deminsa, as the conflict was later referred to, was a hard-fought battle. The Wardens suffered heavily due to the lack of support, lack of scouts and heavy vehicles. The greatest loss of the campaign came about when the captain of the 3rd Company and his command squad were killed by enemy artillery emplacements. Reorganizing the 2nd and 3rd into a single company and appointing a lieutenant to help handle the now 160-man company, Kentaro ordered 2 of his more experienced squads to remove their power armor in favor of the carapace of the scouts. These veterans were unleashed in a month-long sabotage campaign, undermining the capital's defenses along with removing the more competent commanders among the enemy's ranks. After he judged the defenses of the capital had been undermined enough, the full force of his company was unleashed. The defense's guns that had survived the initial sabotage campaign now found themselves with no ammo or unable to properly target the rapidly approaching Marines. The Wardens advanced street by street, cutting down any who opposed them with surgical precision. In the end, no defense could be mounted, and the planetary governor and his inner council had been executed. Following this victory, the few hives still resisting surrendered to imperial authority. The populations of the cities who had defied the Wardens were moved off-world to penal colonies, the bulk of the Wardens' fleet arriving just as this task was complete. Kentaro addressed both the now battle-hardened warriors of his own force and the new Wardens. "We are alone. That is a fact of life out here on the fringe of the galaxy. We are alone and isolated from the Imperium out here. As such, we cannot afford to show weakness. We cannot follow the guidelines set down by someone in the heart of the Imperium some 1,000 years ago. We must form our own way of war, one that does not leave a company bereft of the assets needed for victory. From now on, the Iron Wardens will forge our own path, not one dictated to us by those outside." After this, Kentaro created a new way of organization for the Wardens along with the code that would set the standard for all the Wardens to aspire to. This included the way in which members of the Iron Wardens were expected to serve. The Marines recruited from that point on would drop their family name upon joining the Wardens in order for chapter to have as few ties outside the chapter as possible. The Iron Council was formed to govern the chapter. A seat would be given to each company captain numbering 1 to 8, along with each of the established of the specialist branches, including the stations of the Master of the Forge, the Head Apothecarium, the Master of Faith, Head Chaplain, and the Chief Librarian. Future dreadnoughts would also retain the right to speak on the council to offer their weight to debates. Kentaro kept to the idea of the Iron Hands that no singular being would rule the 10th Legion other than Ferris Manus. Each company captain would hold equal weight when voting on a matter. The first captain of the chapter would act as the head of the Iron Council, as an arbiter as well as the face of the chapter, the first one who wished to have an audience with the chapter. The only exception to this would be the priest of Mars. Like the Iron Hands, the Wardens would have a tech priest that would hold the position of Voice of Mars. They would bring intelligence and mission requests from the Mechanicus to the Wardens. The position would hold no sway over the internal issues of the chapter. For the next few centuries, Kentaro would lead the Wardens in multiple campaigns, establishing the power base that would sustain the Iron Wardens' efforts throughout the Imperium, far into the future. on the planet designated Gravis 9ICH by the Mechanicus adepts that wanted the planet's research bases destroyed on the grounds of heresy, entering orbit with his first company and the head of the strike force made up of a vast majority of the chapter's strength. After scattering the enemy fleet, the Iron Wardens made planetfall, and the ragtag nature of the enemy flotilla gave the Wardens the confidence to press a ground assault immediately. Descending on 9ICH, the Wardens found a well-prepared and entrenched enemy waiting for them. Without scanning the planet-side fortifications, Kentaro led the spearhead of the first company into the fray. Upon discovering the enemy ground forces, Dark Mechanicus with an Iron Warriors warband acting as support, Iron Warden battle companies charged into the trenches where both warriors of the 4th Legion and the combat servitors. While the 10th and 4th Legions were able to match each other in both durability and firepower, the sheer numbers of the servitors began to turn the battle in the heretics' favor. The first captain and his personal squad fought to the last man as the mountain of the slain surrounded them. With Kentaro brought to the brink, limbs removed, the lead tech priest finally showed his face, a mistake that cost the Chaos Worshipper his life, and the Wardens trained all heavy weapons on him, which in turn stunned the entirety of the enemy's mind-slaved force as the network attempted to compensate. Using the time bought, the Wardens withdrew from the planet to orbit, Kentaro with them as the fleet turned the planet to ash, destroying the bases that, as it turned out, weren't protected from orbital bombardment. Awakening on in a dreadnought sarcophagus, Kentaro learned just what his plan had cost the chapter. His own company had essentially fed themselves to regain his broken body, and the 2nd, 6th and 7th stood below 50% operational straight due to the enemy simply swamping the Marines with wave after wave of infantry. This is only made worse by the knowledge that had the Iron Wardens scanned the planet, they simply could have wiped the enemy out from orbit. Unwilling to allow the Wardens to fight with such disadvantage again, Kentaro petitioned the local Adeptus Mechanicus to allow a Skitarii unit to be raised to fight alongside the Iron Wardens. The chapter would provide the training for such a force, while the Martian priesthood would retain the ability to reassign or dissolve the unit. This unit would later be known as the Iron Valkyries and would serve with the Wardens for millennium to come. The next issue for the chapter was what exactly to do with the founder himself. Few of the chapter's founders still lived, and none with the experience of Kentaro. To simply assign him to his old company would be a disservice to him, and could also undermine the authority of the new first captain. As such, a new company was created, the 9th Company of the Iron Wardens. It would function similarly to the first company of other chapters, except instead of veteran Marines, it would be made up of chapters' dreadnoughts. The times when such a formation would fight as one would be few and far between, but such a mighty force would shape many conflicts to come. The world Deminsa III is the home of the Iron Wardens. The world was liberated as a part of the chapter's first campaign. The world itself is an industrial planet, producing mostly bolt rounds and melter canisters, meaning the chapter is never short of ammunition. The world itself covered in massive industrial complexes, all connected by mag train lines and highways. The only bit of the world that is not actively involved in its primary exports is the former planetary capital. This bombed-out husk of a city is used by the Iron Wardens to practice maneuvers as well as to serve as a reminder of the fate of those who turn against the Imperium. It should be noted that its constant supply of ammunition is by far the biggest contribution that Deminsa III makes to the Iron Wardens. For recruitment, less than 10% of the Marines hail from Deminsa III. The chapter turns to other Death and Hive worlds from across the subsector to replenish its numbers. The Ethereum Arx is the orbital space station that serves as the headquarters of the Iron Wardens. The bronze-colored citadel sits above the world of Deminsa III, acting as the first line of defense. Its superstructure covered with capital ship-grade weapons, it is capable of seeing off a small battle group without assistance. Its interior is, when compared to other fortress monasteries, rather barren. Aside from a few symbols of the chapter, the fortress is built around function rather than flair. Most relics and trophies of the chapter are stored in the Vault, a storage facility guarded by the Ninth Company, containing the remains of extinct xenospecies and powerful warlords, along with several weapons of mass destruction and rare vehicles no longer in mass production. The name of their fortress comes from the crystals mined in the asteroid belt between the second and third planet. When refined, the ore is glowing cyan crystal, able to act as a focusing point or conduit for energy. Its limited quantities mean that its use is limited to the Iron Wardens. While the chapter has used it in the power weapons of captains and veterans of the chapter, the largest example of this rare material is embedded within the Ethereum Arcs itself. A chunk of the ore is used as a focusing lens for a super laser built into the station. Able to blast apart capital ships in a single shot, the unique frequency that energy the crystal focuses seemingly ignores void shields. The laser spelled an early end to many an assault on the system. The combat doctrine of the Iron Wardens is true to the ways of the 10th Legion. They share the technological strength of their prenatal chapter. They are professionals waging war without a shred of mercy or passion. They are soldiers, not warriors, unlike the sons of Russ, Sanguinius, or Rubute Gilliman. There are no battle cries or chants over the Vox while Marines charge into melee. While hand-to-hand combat is still drilled into the Marines throughout their service, the chapter puts very little value on honor duels. Commanders of the Iron Wardens will often use the idea of honor against the enemy, luring enemy war leaders into the open only to be nailed by the artillery and airstrikes. Unlike other more proud chapters, the Wardens don't reject stealth and make great use of their reconnaissance marines to prepare for operations well in advance, mounting sabotage campaigns to undermine defenses and any efforts to escape the oncoming columns of tanks and dreadnoughts. Information is viewed as a key to victory, and the Iron Wardens will use multiple hit-and-run attacks to judge enemy reaction times before moving in for a singular killing blow. At the start of the 42nd millennium, the Iron Wardens have emerged from the aftermath of the 13th Black Crusade, bloodied but unbowed. Now, with the Galaxy Torn 2 and a new breed of Marine being introduced into the Insular chapter, the Iron Wardens will nevertheless remain sworn to their duty and the Imperium.